tonight's topic, gallbladder, kind of falls right into that same category where we often don't know we have any gallbladder issues, and we'll talk about what those could mean until we have them. So tonight I'm going to shed some light on that and also kind of shed some light on the fact that we're all probably vulnerable for having a little dysfunction in our gallbladders.
Yes, it's very true. And it's so interesting because I don't remember talking this much about gallbladders and like the health sphere in the past. So I'm excited for you to break it down for us and make it simple. And in the meantime, Bart, do we have a clinical insight for this evening?
We do. I just have one this evening, a clinical insight. And for those of you who are new or just joining us once again, thanks for coming back. We appreciate that. And do your best. Keep doing the thing. Keep sharing it out. Keep spreading the love. The intention is solely just to help make life and health simple for people. Tonight's going to be a great example of it. We're going to talk about the gallbladder, how important it is for the human body to have one, even though we might hear contrary to that at times. And if you're new to the show, first I'll start off with what I'm going to do right now, and that's just give you a clinical insight. And that's really an experience or an insight that I have while I'm practicing. I'm in practice, and I say, wow, this is a conversation that comes up all the time. Therefore, I think I should share this with everyone. All right. So this situation, a young gentleman was traveling. He's here on vacation. We're in probably the most beautiful beaches in the entire country. Not even probably. I think they are the most beautiful beaches in the country. And this is very common. I'll have someone that's taking a long drive, and this gentleman drove all the way over from Texas, somewhere, I think in Dallas, I believe. So long drives. And we see that from a lot of people. And as a result, his back was a little bit tweaked, comes in, and we're happy to help him out. So if you're traveling, love to have you here. We get him tuned up, and he says, Doc, what else can I do? And I said, well, after feeling what I'm feeling here today, no doubt about it, start to incorporate some better movement and some stretching certainly would be beneficial. And almost immediately says, I'm so tight. I've always been tight. And the more I stretch, the tighter I feel.
I've heard this before, Bart. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we've probably talked about it on the show. That's not an uncommon conversation, even if it isn't those exact words. And then what happens is that to his dismay, and even what he shared with me, was that it gets discouraging. That if I stretch really hard, and that's what a lot of guys will do, will stretch really hard, it hurts. And therefore, it kind of sets them back a little bit. So anyways, this was the conversation, and this is where it went. I said, well, here's the thing. My guess, feeling you and getting to know you a little bit, so which is meaning all in 15 minutes, you're probably going, like most Americans are. And he said, absolutely, Doc. I got a business, I got a family, I got kids, I got a wife. I'm always on the go. So, well, that requires a lot of muscle effort, a lot of nerve, conductivity, and essentially your body stays a little bit in what's called a fight or flight, or in traditional Chinese medicine, we call that a yang energy, fire. So it doesn't necessarily have to be fight or flight, but it's the kind of bound up tenseness that we use to get through the day. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as we can unwind. The challenge here, though, one of the fundamental, and this is one of the things that's so wonderful when I put my hands on people, is I can tell right away if they're magnesium deficient. Because
Bart, how can you tell that? That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating because the fascia, which is the outer layer of the body, so there's on the outer layer of a body, and the fascia goes actually through the body as well. That is one piece. It's not like just in the arm or just in the leg. So if you have any changes in normal anatomical structure, posture for that matter, never mind surgeries and whatnot, but the moment we have abnormal postures and abnormal loads in the body, the fascia tightens up. And that fascia, to loosen all connective tissue, muscles, tendons, ligaments, etc., they all need a relaxation mineral, or what we call a yin mineral, and that's what magnesium is.
So when you said yang earlier, that's like yin and maybe yang, we might have heard it said.
Yeah, yin or yang, right? Well, yin, which is kind of calming, and then yang or yang, which is depending on how you like to say it, that's our fire. And there's nothing wrong with either one. Ideally, we have a balance, or we're using one and then we're able to shift and get into the other one, and there's kind of a harmony that takes place. What we don't want is being stuck, and most people are stuck in that sympathetic state, or what we're calling yang, and as a result of it, you're in a state of contraction. And one of the things, almost classic for all people that say these very things, I've always been tight, they're always magnesium deficient. It doesn't, and magnesium is the tool that your body uses to release, to unwind. And, you know, we've talked about it so much here in the show, but it's depleted by sugar, by alcohol, by poor sleep, by stress, you name it. There's so many things. And your body needs magnesium for over 200-300 different enzymatic reactions in the body. So that's why, for the most part, I almost suggest everyone utilizing magnesium. Helps sleep, helps you poop. So the clinical insight here, if you find yourself always tight. Now, if it's because you're absolutely doing nothing, so be it. Like, you got to get to work. You know, get on your yoga mat or find someone, you know, find a video or something to start stretching. It doesn't take a lot of time, you know, but 5 or 10 minutes every morning certainly would be better than none. Could be a game changer. You know, the other part of this that ends up in the part of the conversation is this happened today as well. So, well, I've always done these things. So, well, the truth is that the human body is not designed to do these things. We are not designed to sit in our chairs all day long and stare at these computer screens. We're not designed to sit white knuckled behind a vehicle and drive under stress and tension. And at some point, it catches up to us. So it's almost like this chronic condition that's taking place. So the simple answer for this gentleman was, let's start some magnesium right away. And what I know, what's pretty cool, is that tonight, the night that he was all beat up and bound up in his back pain and everything, I know he's going to sleep better, which is awesome. And then I know if he then does the exact same stretching, and then we point him in the direction of our spinal flow video, which everyone here, if you want that spinal flow video, it's the flow that I do every single morning. It's how I helped heal my 3 bulging discs in my lower spine. It's on our website. Maybe you can actually link that. There's very, very simple ways, a little magnesium, a little bit of spinal flow, some good thoughts, and you're good to go.
That is so powerful. Did you say good thoughts at the end there, Bart?
I sure did.
You mean like just dragging on, feeling kind of like bummed out about it doesn't help you heal?
No, so but I'm glad you said it that way, because it's real. When we are mad or upset, we're sad, we're frustrated, and we'll talk a little about that tonight with the gallbladder. That those emotions create an energy space in our body. That's yang. That's the fire. So, and that's what we're trying to at times be able to reduce. So imagine that you carry your anger, your frustration, your worry, concerns, even though the job is done or the task that you're doing during the day is done. You say, well, I only work 8 hours a day. I'm only at my computer 4 hours. But the emotion you carry all day, and you carry it into the evening and maybe into the next day. And that's how even our emotions can break our physical body down.
It's so wild how powerful that awareness becomes when you start to notice those words you're saying to yourself. I'm glad that we're touching on this because it's a big part of making health simple, Bart. I know as we open up these topics. So should we take a dive into our topic for tonight? Yeah,
let's do it. Let's dive in. Let's talk about the gallbladder. Let's make people familiar with what it is, where it is, how it works, and why it's important also to keep it if we can.
Yeah. And I really love the question that you pose of, could it be my gallbladder? Because this may not be something that is simplified so far. I know we hear a little bit of like, okay, gallbladder surgeries happen, but like, what are the steps leading up to that? Like how do we find ourselves here?
Okay. So let's just talk about surgeries for a second. So, and this is what partially drove me to want to talk about this tonight. So inevitably I'll hear people come into my office and say, oh, doc, I don't know if you deal with this or not, but I had to go to my doctor the other day and they said I've got a sludgy gallbladder, and literally these are the words that I heard twice last week, and this is what kind of drove me to because we've done podcasts before on a gallbladder. 2 times last week I had patients say, my doctor told me that it's sludgy, there's gallstones in there, it's working at less, and they give you a percentage. It's only working at 5% or 15%. And they measure that by looking at the different biles that go back and forth from the liver. And they say, oh, we got to just take it out. No big deal. We do this all the time. And first thing I'd like to say that is, and no disrespect to any doctor, but the last thing in the world we should ever do is normalize surgeries that take body parts out of the human body. They're there for a reason, no matter what we've said about them, what we've been told about them, and I'll crystal clear about that. So when I bring this conversation up, so let's just say in the last 4 or 5 days, I've talked about, I'm going to do my podcast on Tuesday. The people will ask me, what are you going to do? What's the show going to be on this week? I say, gallbladder. Oh, no kidding. Inevitably, if there's a room of 5 or 6 people listening to this here tonight, either you or someone you're sitting next to or someone has had gallbladder surgery. Unfortunately, I think it has become the most popular, and that's a very common phrase for it. It's a popular way to alleviate some what they think is gut pain. And right now we're up to 1 million gallbladder surgeries per year. It's ridiculous. It tells us there's an issue here, and we're going to get into those issues. Here's what I would say to the other people, because a lot of us are sitting there going, oh my goodness, I can't believe someone would have gallbladder surgery and take it out because you don't have any symptoms. So you might be thinking that to yourself. I might be thinking that. Wait, you might be thinking that. So how do you go from, I would never have my gallbladder removed, to, oh my goodness, I'm getting my gallbladder removed tonight? And that's often what'll take place. So I want to navigate through that. And then I'll also give some suggestions, make sure that you remind me here, because so many people that are listening to this have had their gallbladder out. And there are things that are important to do. So what you're going to hear when it comes to gallbladder surgeries is this: oh, it's safe and effective. I want to explain what that really means to you. So safe meaning that you don't die from it. Safe, and it is safe in those terms of that surgery is not very life-threatening. There's always a risk, no doubt about it, but it's one of the lower risks to have, to die from. When I say effective, that's where things get a little squirrely. So effective meaning that the pain that you came in with is now gone. And I believe that the symptom relief from that, if you're only talking about that being successful or being effective, I believe it's 50-50. When you think of
amazing odds, Bart.
No, they're not. But when it comes to surgery, that's considered at times a home run. So here's what happens with. So it is the men and women like myself who are practicing functional medicine, who have had patients for 5 years and 10 years and 20 years. We've been doing this for long periods of time. We see and follow and take care of those patients who've had their gallbladders removed and see what happens down the road. And the last thing we'd say is that they're effective, because when you cut the gallbladder out, you do not cut out the root cause of what made the gallbladder go bad. Mm-hmm. And I think anyone and everyone would scratch their head and go, oh, I get that. You're right. Like, that didn't fix anything. We just cut it out. And therefore it can't communicate with the body anymore. It can't communicate with the brain anymore. So now we cut this thing out. And so I think so with all that being said, there are solutions. Let's preferably keep them. No one is really completely in the light here, meaning that you're not at least potentially vulnerable for this to happen to you, and we'll walk into that in just a moment here. So let's talk a little bit about the function, because this is important that we understand what does the gallbladder do. So we'll just start with anatomy.
Okay. So where is the gallbladder in the body, Bart? Yes. Yeah.
So we'll just assume, I'll just pretend that no one even knows where the liver is. So the liver is going to be on the right side. If you went down your right side, and when you got to the bottom of your rib cage, at that bottom rib there, that's the bottom of your liver. And in theory, as long as you don't have some fatty liver disease, your liver is up underneath the rib cage. Very, very important organ. And it's one of the reasons that is protected by this beautiful thing called the human body, and the wisdom and the innate wisdom that says, if it's really important, I will probably protect it with a structure, with a cage. And that would be like your rib cage, no different than our heart. There's a big sternum in the middle, big plate, which your heart sits right behind. So there's a lot of wisdom within this body. Right underneath, a little bit off to the right side, underneath and kind of behind, it's really more behind than it is underneath, your liver is where your gallbladder is. It was almost center to the right, just a little bit. Okay. I'm pointing that out is because that's where sometimes people will have the actual pain. And sometimes the pains, there's a lot of symptoms that can show up with gallbladder issues. Yeah, the severe ones would be they have a meal, and then 20 or 30 minutes after the meal, they have severe pain right in that area that I talked about. And that pain could be, gut wrenching, buckled over in your liver, and oh my goodness, and off to the ER you go. And that's where things get a little tricky. Then you might go to the ER and they run some tests. Maybe they do an ultrasound and see that it's sludgy or backed up or there's stones, and then schedule you down the road within days or a week or something like that to go get your gallbladder removed. So hopefully we don't get to that point, because there's a lot of precursors, there's a lot of symptoms that happen prior to that time.
So when you have this experience of like gallbladder pain, Bart, can I ask what the actual pain comes from? Like, is it the organ contracting? Is it like trying to do its job?
Okay, so there's a couple of different reasons here. So part of it is that Well, this will just dive in. So what happens is, so the function of the gallbladder is to store bile. And it's one of the reasons that they say that we don't necessarily need it, because the liver has bile. So the liver produces the bile, and then it sends it over to the gallbladder to store it, because we need this bile. And I'll explain the function of the bile in just a moment here. So gallbladder is supposed to have all this bile. It's supposed to be relatively thin, so it can, it's almost, think of like a lubricant for that matter, where it can lubricate the things that are coming out of the liver, out of the stomach, and it can help send them through the intestines. So that's kind of the job of the bile. In the event, say that you become dehydrated, literally, you're not drinking enough water, or you're consuming, or you're consuming foods that will dehydrate you. So you could have a lot of caffeine in your body, soda's a big one, sugars, etc. These are other ways, other than just lack of water, that a person could become dehydrated. You can have other things, toxins in the body that take up all your water. Your gallbladder will literally become sludgy. So that bile, instead of thin and very, has the potential to be a lubricant, becomes sludgy. That's the beginning phases of it. Once it becomes sludgy, it's supposed to, when you eat food and the body recognizes, hey, there's some fats there. And it's a big part of what the gallbladder does. It releases its bile to help break down fats. And it literally squeezes it. It flexes itself. And in that flex, it's supposed to release the bile. When it gets sludgy and it flexes, it's painful.
Okay.
Now, there's another part of pain that ties into this. And this is where it gets a little interesting. And this is where I want everyone to start listening, because there's some other symptoms. Some of the other classic symptoms of gallbladder pain will be, probably one of the most classic is burping. So someone comes in, burping. Someone eats, belching, if you want to call it belching, but burping, that's what I'm talking about. They eat shortly after they start burping. And that's because the gallbladder is either sludgy, there's stones built up in there, and there's not releasing the bile, the food's just sitting in the stomach. So we build up a gas and we burp. Classic sign. Gas is another one. So going out the other side, that's another classic example. Bloating, of course. Migraine headaches fall into this category. There's a buildup of toxicity. Then that's one of the big things that we forget. This is when I hear people say, well, you don't need the gallbladder. I think, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? The gallbladder, big part of what it does, it has all that excess bile to help rid toxins. And in the world that we're living in nowadays, you need a lot of bile. Anyways, so where that gallbladder is, there happens to be a nerve right behind that. So what happens is, as the gallbladder becomes a little dysfunctional, gets dehydrated, it's getting too stressed out, there's a lot of toxins coming into the body, it'll swell up. And they call that cholecystitis, which is inflammation of the gallbladder. When that happens, it presses on a nerve that sits right behind the gallbladder called your phrenic nerve. And the phrenic nerve goes right up into the cervical spine. So one of the classic signs, kind of silent behind the scenes, is right shoulder, right neck pain. It could definitely be on the left side as well, but because the gallbladder is a little bit on the right side, you'll typically see that pain nonstop, always achy in between the shoulder blades, in the shoulder and in the neck. And again, as chiropractors, we see this all the time because we're able to deduct. We go, well, wait a minute. We're doing all the right things. You're getting adjusted, you're getting massage, you have good posture, you're doing all the stretches, doing the exercise, and this is chronic. And at some point, it's not even because you have misalignments. It's because the tissue is becoming affected. And that's happening because the gallbladder is inflamed, they're putting pressure on the phrenic nerve, and you're getting this constant low-grade tension build up on your right side. So another just kind of classic example or a symptom that can happen.
When you talk about bloating as it relates to gallbladder, Bart, would that be like more kind of upper GI area or lower, or could it kind of like spread across the belly in general?
It could spread across, but typically you're going to see it in the upper side, upper GI system.
And that discomfort that could arrive like in your right shoulder. So that's not just when you're eating. It could like be a kind of consistent inflammation of the phrenic nerve.
Correct. That type of discomfort can show up in that. It's one of the tricky things because it's not always correlated to food. Now, it certainly could be exacerbated by food, and you don't really connect those two, right? Because how many people are really going to connect the correlation between my neck and my shoulder are bothering me. And it had something to do with the fact that I just had some French fries. It
Definitely.
would be a hard fat to break down. So that could be something that triggered, or a bag of potato chips, and correlating to your shoulder pain and neck pain. Most people aren't going to do that.
Absolutely. Are there any other symptoms that you would look out for when you're talking about gallbladder kind of discomfort, dysfunction?
Yeah, let me back up one though, because you asked a great question. Where would that bloating be? So there's some other great functions of the bile. So bile, and having copious amounts of it, also helps us balance the pH of the intestines. So bile by itself is alkaline. And because the stomach is very acidic, it gives this balancing act. It's a little bit of yin and yang again. So we really need the gallbladder in there to kind of be balancing things out with our alkalinity or our acidity in the stomach. So what happens for people who end up with gallstones, or they end up with sludge in their gallbladder, they're not releasing the bile. So now the gut pH changes. And this is when we start to see things like the small intestine, the bacterial overgrow in that area. And that's what we call small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So that's where the bloating becomes super discomfort. Like we have this discomfort. That can happen with or without food once it gets down to that line, down that way. But a lot of times, and that's a classic example of someone who has their gallbladder out, never really had gut issues before. They didn't think they did. They just had this gallbladder episode, found out it was sludgy, was only working at 5%, whatever statistic they give it. And then down the road, they start to develop things like leaky gut. They start to develop things like SIBO. Mm-hmm. All right, now I'm going to jump forward to some other symptoms. So this bile that comes from the liver, and then it's sent over through these little bile ducts. Think of like these little tubes sent over into the gallbladder. Once it gets there, it hangs out there. And it's in a little bit of a different concentration. And it's used very specifically for things like, especially at nighttime. And this is when the gallbladder really does its best work. At night, it's going to help clear pathogens. It helps break down cholesterols. So when I see a cholesterol panel, and we do a very kind of elaborate, I'll call it, blood panel for both men and women. They're a little bit different. But when I look at this, there's a couple markers I'm looking very specifically to, something called AST and ALT. And if they're just a little bit high, I already start thinking we have the beginning of sludge. Even if if I see that and I start to see the cholesterol panel start to rise up, I go, oh, the gallbladder is getting sludgy. And this is the sign. This is one of the causes of cholesterol is going up, because part of what the bile does, it breaks down fats for us. And again, this would be a great conversation to say, listen, just because you have high cholesterol doesn't mean you need a statin. A lot of times you got to clean up the part of your body that breaks up those lipids, that breaks up those fats. So another important part of the bile, this to me is one of the most important parts, it has to do with those fats. So it's going to help us essentially break down fats, lipids, good ones and bad ones in our body. The good ones are vitamins A, D, E, and K. And if you've been listening, you hear that, man, these are important ones. So vitamin D, right? Vitamin A for eyesight, for immune system. Vitamin E, prostate health, breast health. There's so many things that vitamin E, clearing excess estrogens. But if we don't have the amount and the proper timing of the bile in the body, we're going to lose out on all the benefits here. Another huge one is just flat out omega-3s, which omega-3s are critical for brain health, fighting off things like dementia and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and all of this, that little gland in there, the gallbladder, making sure that we have plenty of this stuff called bile.
So I think that there may also be bile in the liver, Bart. Is that different than the bile that you find in the gallbladder?
There is a subtle difference. So almost forever, we've been told that it's just the same exact concentration. But what we're learning now through science, that the concentration is a little bit different, that the concentration in the gallbladder is a little bit different, that it has better properties, or kind of, let's say, more diverse properties, that the liver is going to send it. So basically, the liver is going to send all the stuff it's breaking down to the gallbladder to really have to deal with it. So we're talking about removal of viruses, bacterias, estrogen. So estrogen is one of the classic reasons, high estrogens is one of the classic reasons that people start to develop a sludgy gallbladder. and or even up to the point where they develop stones. And you'd only know if you had stones, if you did an ultrasound. So there is a little bit of a difference. And once it starts to get sludgy, now all of these things can be in play. That's when we can start to see the effects of high estrogen in the body. That's when we can start to see if you can't break down your fats properly, then we end up in a little bit more of a toxic situation. So the liver and the gallbladder play a huge role at night in what we call phase 1 and phase 2 of detoxification. And if I was to bounce around here just a little bit, so on our show here, we've talked a lot about how there's a circadian rhythm, and in traditional Chinese medicine, we're trying to honor and obey this nature's clock and kind of nature's rules, if we want to call it. And every night between 1 and 3 a.m. is essentially when your liver does its best work. So preferably, we're always sleeping during that time. Preferably, it's uninterrupted, and preferably, it's not under the influence of a lot of alcohol or medications, because otherwise, then the liver has more work to do before it gets to do the work of helping you become a stronger human being. Just prior to that, and I don't talk about this probably as much as I probably should on this show, but just prior to that, at 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., so the gallbladder is doing its best work. So gallbladder first, then liver. And there's a reason for me to explain this and how important it is. So the way that nature set it up, and there's beautiful wisdom within the body, the gallbladder goes to work and it clears itself out, and it gets prepared, and it clears out the little bile ducts, and it clears itself out, and it does all the work that it needs to do, sends the bile into the intestines, helping everything slough through, helping this phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of detoxification. That's getting things through the intestines. So it's supposed to be completely cleared out. Now, if we happen to be awake between 11 and 1 a.m., it's not doing its work. So that's why a lot of us aren't off the hook here thinking that this is the person with a bad diet. Now, granted, if you have a bad diet, this is going to be, you're more susceptible. But if you're a night owl and you carry a little stress into the evening, so there's emotions that are very kind of that associate with gallbladder issues, especially when we look at things through the lens of traditional Chinese medicine. And for those of you who aren't familiar with traditional Chinese medicine, there's really no separation between the mind and the body. So there's a general understanding through any ailment that the human may face or go through. There's always an emotional, there's always a physical component. There's no separation of mind and body. So the emotions that typically accompany gallbladder disturbance would be things like resentment and frustration. So those are the big ones. So if we have some resentment in our life, we're staying up late. And even though you're not drinking sodas, you're not having alcohol, you're not eating the French fries, you're not eating the fried foods, you're not having the Red Bulls and the 5-hour energy drinks, which, by the way, those are all big time vices. Those are the things you would take and drink and eat if you wanted to sludge up your gallbladder. Let's say you don't do any of those and you have a very good diet. Those are those emotions, resentment and frustration, particularly staying up late. Those are ways that you could literally sludge up your gallbladder, change the pH of your intestines, and even though you eat perfect, have a pretty messed up diet, messed up gut.
The power of the emotional state, Bart, to affect the physical body, I think is like even more than we ever realize. I love when we talk about this element of it, because there is this piece to health that is not just the kind of like what's going in here, but it's all everything, like the things that you're consuming on all fronts.
I'll share another clinical insight that just came to mind that happened today. And it ties these two things in together. So every one of us has a very particular meridian point in our body called LI4. So it stands for large intestine 4. And the way that you find it, if you just look at the web of your hand and you follow your thumb up and your pointer finger up, and where they meet, you drop down one like finger head worth and you pinch that point. That's a stress point. And a lot of different cultures, a lot of different therapeutics use this to relieve fire. So what we call it in Chinese medicine, this is how we relieve the fire above. So it's on the large intestine. When you think, well, wait a minute, this is on my hand. Well, that's the large intestine meridian. And this is where we hold a lot of the frustration. And that frustration, and it doesn't mean you're angry is part of this too. It could be, but it doesn't mean you're angry. It could be frustration because maybe you think things should be moving along faster in life than they are. Maybe you're working really hard and the dividends aren't there, or maybe things just aren't paying off, or you're just having a string of what you think is bad luck, but an energy of frustration. And you could just be frustrated, quite frankly. That's where we hold a lot of fire. When I, have someone in an acupuncture session, I would say 99 out of 100 times, I needle that spot because I know we all hold a lot. So the gentleman today asked me, said, wait a minute, you said, what'd you call it? And I said, large intestine 4. This just happens to be the name of the spot. And he goes, have anything to do with my large intestine? Because I have a history here. And I said, well, not directly in the sense that I'm going to use this as going to change your large intestine, but more so the fact that the large intestine is designed to help us eliminate and let go, which goes right back to the opposite of frustration, is holding and gripping. So here's a clinical insight. So I said, let me see your hands. And I'm holding one on the right side's a little bit different than the left side. One's more emotional, one's more kind of production or work orientated. So I'm doing his left hand. I'm squeezing in there. When I tell you I'm squeezing lightly, and he's about to jump off my table. I'm not even in the acupuncture room. I'm actually not using needles. I'm doing acupuncture with my fingers, and I'm doing it in the chiropractic room. And so I first started just doing it because he also has tennis elbow. And one of the reasons that tennis elbow has essentially manifests into the body is because we have a lot of frustration and the chi doesn't flow through the body to heal. I know I'm way off track, folks. I apologize, but I think
this is so cool. Okay. Please keep going.
All right. So tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, all of those above. Remember, Chinese medicine. No, I know you just hit the ground and it was a hard tennis match, but understand you've had hard tennis matches 1,000 times before. There's no separating the mind and the body when we look at it from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective. So I didn't tell him the part about the elimination. So I am just holding this, treating it physically only. And I felt in the moment he was wide open to hearing something that's a little outside of the box. And I told him this is LI4, stands for large intestine 4. It's where we hold our fire. And that got his attention. And I said, well, it's the emotion of holding. It lets me know that you're gripping a little too much. You're trying to force things, getting a little frustrated. And the moment you let go, you're going to reduce your pain. And in the moment, the guy closed his eyes and the pressure I was giving him, which was making him jump, no longer hurt him. That's the power of the emotions. You change your mind, you can change the psychosomatic, psycho the mind, soma the body instantaneously. So we went there and then flipped it to the other side. And it was super high pain, same conversation, talked a little about letting go. The only thing I added in this one, the first one was I used the words production and kind of work oriented stuff. The next one I talked about relationships. And in those two, just him hearing them and recognizing that he probably should let go. When I say his pain went from a 10 out of 10 to 3s and 4s in seconds, it was really fascinating. And that's the power of the mind.
The power of the mind is unbelievable, Bart. And thank you for taking the time to explain this. Is this something that we could manipulate ourselves on our thumbs?
100%. In this particular scenario, because his partner was with him, she was right there. I showed them how to kind of do it for each other, that would be a better way, because it's often difficult to put yourself in a little discomfort.
Yes.
It's just not natural to do. So you absolutely, for everyone listening now, just find that web in there, start pushing underneath, squeeze a little bit. You'll find a spot. I promise you. Yeah.
I'm doing it right now, Bart. I feel one side a little bit more than the other. It's interesting.
And then if you're doing that to yourself, then start thinking of, what do I need to let go? What would serve me to let go of right now? What thoughts, what emotions, what people, what things, what foods, whatever, what would serve you to let go? And it wouldn't surprise me that then all of a sudden, just the words coming out of your mouth, you'll have a harder time finding the pain in your hand.
Bart, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, so we got derailed. Let me roll back in here. So we're talking about gallbladder. We're talking about things getting sludgy. I want to talk a little bit about what else causes this sludginess, because and this is high estrogens. I listed off some of the foods. Bad diet is the classic one. Often what they'll say, if you have a gallbladder issue, you can't eat any foods in high fat. And that's not the truth. The fat has nothing to do with it. Your gallbladder's they're designed to break down fats. So it's designed to help you break down your cholesterol. The challenge is not the fact that you're eating fats, avocados and, canola oils. I'm sorry, hopefully not canola oils, coconut oils. If you're eating those and you're man, these just don't feel right, tells me the gallbladder is probably sludgy. Oddly enough, there's a commonality here. It's literally dehydration, not drinking enough water. Or you're drinking things like, could be sweet tea, it could be sodas, Red Bulls, and 5-hour energy drinks, all these things that have a ton of chemicals that dehydrate the body. So let's make sure we're kind of getting rid of those. But heartburn, even neck pain, gas, bloating. Sometimes we get a little bit of the extended gut, the bloating, whatnot. The neck pain travels up in the head, and that's the same direction. The gallbladder meridian. Here's why the gallbladder can kind of create almost this wide array of discomfort. The gallbladder meridian starts in the head, wraps up around the ear, goes to the back, all the way to the bottom of the body. So that meridian, and that means anywhere along that meridian, when you have a dysfunctional gallbladder, it can disrupt the chi going to literally any part of your body. So classic is right neck pain and right shoulder, but it really could be anywhere. And tonight, when I was thinking about this, it's migraine sufferers. Rarely have they ever been told that there's a high likelihood that there's a combination of a decrease in magnesium and a gallbladder issue simultaneously taking place. And that's usually the situation.
All right. Can you say that again? Migraine sufferers have never.
Migraine sufferers, almost always, there's two things, and I'll connect those two real quick here. So the most, hopefully at least, are understanding that there's a connection to a deficiency in magnesium. It's a yin mineral, helps things, everything from getting, fluids back up into the brain to help neutralize the body, and all the other enzymatic reactions are required. But the reason that gallbladder is so connected to it is we miss out on this. And this is the bummer when the doctors tell the patients, no big deal, we do this all the time. What they should be saying is, well, part of the responsibility and the function of the gallbladder is to remove the toxins that are deadly to the human body, that are toxic to your brain, that are the ones that your gallbladder is doing the dirty work when the lights are off and no one wants to see what's going on. That's your gallbladder doing that work. It is spraying all of these things that your liver and your gallbladder are teaming up on, and the liver's kind of banking on the fact that the gallbladder, once the liver does all the heavy lifting, breaking things down and beating things up with its enzymes and using all the family resources, it's using all the vitamins, minerals, and enzymes, and they're using up all these things. It's kind of banking on the fact that the gallbladder is going to have enough bile and it's going to be thin enough and lubricating enough to slide it through and complete phase 3 of detoxification. If it does not, you recirculate those toxins. And that buildup is where those migraines come from.
That is super fascinating, Bart. And I know that you are going to give us some tools of what to do, whether we have a gallbladder that is healthy or dysfunctional, or even if we don't have a gallbladder, because I know that you have some clinical experience of working with folks who are 10 years past their gallbladder surgery.
Yeah, and the other thing, so and listen, I'm going to give some solutions for people if they had the gallbladders out. But some of the other things that I'll see down the road is, once you can't metabolize your fats that well, vitamins A, D, E, and K, and you're not going to be able to absorb and break down your fatty acids, and then we see all kinds of things. I see skin issues, psoriasis, eczemas. We see scaly skin, or skin that ages faster than it needs to, because we need those essential fatty acids to get back into things like our skin, which is the largest eliminated organ of the human body. So there's so many symptoms that happen down the road. We see hormone changes. One I didn't even mention here, and I don't want to say this because there's one that makes me angry. I take it back. They all make me angry. When you get your gallbladder removed, what they forget to tell you too is that bile is part of what breaks down T4 to T3. So it is very common that a couple of years after gallbladder removal, that we'll see that person all of a sudden develop hypothyroidism. And now we have a hormonal issue. So, and then it just continues to go. Now, listen, I'll say it right now, for the people who have their gallbladder removed, number one, clean diet. And we're going to get into some of the solutions. We'll dive into them right now. So the diet being clean is some of the things that you want to get out is the high sugar, the processed food, the chemicals. So those, like the sodas, those are beat down on the body, period. They're big because they got the sugar, they got the chemicals, they get all the things, they dehydrate the body. So let's make sure we got the sodas, the Red Bulls, the monster drinks, all of those things. They got to go bye-bye. And even a 5-hour energy drink, it's just a bunch of junk in there. So we got to be mindful of all that kind of stuff. We got to really be mindful of all this conversation we're starting to hear that we've heard for the last couple of years about seed oils and bad oils, canola oil. There's a reason that we've kind of, committed to the community that our restaurant will never have canola oils and vegetable oils in there because they're bad for the human body. And the bummer is that when you first eat them, a lot of times you're not in pain, but over time it gets harder and harder to break them down. Next thing you know, you do get a little bit of them. And then all of a sudden you go out to eat. And some people are going to relate exactly what I'm about to say here. You go to a certain restaurant, you get a certain dish, it's made in canola oil, and you go, oh, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom now.
Mm-hmm.
That is your gallbladder going, nope, couldn't do this. And your body goes into this detox phase. Like, oh, we got to get this stuff out of here because we can't lubricate it. It's coming out of the body right here, right now. And that would be in that category if they say, well, stay away from fats. It wasn't the fat issue. It's that your bile. Well, one, it was canola oil. You don't want that. Your body wants to get rid of it. But ideally, even if you have the canola oil, your gallbladder is going to do a good job protecting you if it has enough bile. So, but at 1 million a year, man, we can get to a point where people don't even have the gallbladders left.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Yeah.
All right. So let's walk through some of the solutions here and we'll let people ride. All right. So one, we got to clean up our diet. I've said it 1,000 times before, and I'm going to say it again. So it's God's garden. We got to keep it clean. If it comes from a root plant tree, walks in the garden, swims in the sea, we eat it. If it doesn't, don't. And it's okay to flex a little discipline. It's okay to have to learn how to enjoy food again and open up our palate to really enjoy things that aren't full of sugar and full of processed food and all these chemicals that are tricking us about our sensations and the way that we're eating. So there's never going to be a single situation where having a bad diet is ever good for you. So let's clean up the diet. And then
and Bart, for that one, like regardless of your gallbladder status, always helpful towards health to clean up the diet, correct? Like you're going to benefit regardless.
It is. And all I find there is that it takes a little discipline because we were all groomed to eat carbohydrates and sugar. And I think that's a good word for it, being that we're groomed. Just everything all the time. If someone's happy, yes. If someone's sad, yes. It is just what we do. We eat carbohydrates and sugar all the time. So you're going to have to flex a little discipline, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but that discomfort is what will make us stronger human beings.
Yes.
And then there's more joy in knowing that you have the discipline not to be ruled by this biochemistry, not to be ruled by your sugar receptors, not be ruled by some chemicals that some manufacturers put in their food. So let's get her clean. Now, there's a couple herbs that work fantastic when it comes to the gallbladder itself. So I'll go there, and then there's a couple of different things that I've used clinically. And again, I'm not giving you this information to be your doctor and clean up your gallbladder. These are things that we're going for root causes here. How do we help the body function better? So dandelion root, milk thistle, and globe artichoke are phenomenal herbs in helping the gallbladder liver relationship, in thinning the bile and helping get rid of that sludginess. Absolutely fantastic. So we have a formula. I didn't make the formula, but there's a formula that I use that comes through MediHerb, and that one together, it's called Livton. So that when you think of Livton, think of this is a liver gallbladder product, and it's absolutely phenomenal in supporting your body to help thin that bile so it can work more like a lubricant. And have I seen over the years? I can't. Literally thousands of times people have been told, maybe not thousands, maybe that's exaggeration. Definitely hundreds of times I've had people, clients over the years say, I've been told that I have to get my gallbladder out. I said, well, let's just give it a little bit of time. Let's give it 30, 60, 90 days. And we clear it right up and it never becomes an issue again.
No kidding, Bart.
All the time. Cool. All the time. Yeah. And some people it takes a little bit longer than others. And it's usually not because we don't have the right strategy when it comes to the diet and the herbs. Usually those are spot on. Well, before I say that, there's what I'll also always throw in there. There's a high concentration beet product, and it's called AF beta food. And this is absolutely fantastic in helping, again, thin the bile, which means get the sludge out of the gallbladder. So and that's the beauty of it. That's that's like predominantly it. If I also know there's some inflammation taking place, maybe, and how would I know if there's inflammation? I will palpate and push directly on that spot we talked about. If there's some pain in there, I know that the gallbladder is inflamed. That's when we start to incorporate a little bit the turmeric, which would be fantastic for it in this situation. And I almost always do put it in there because I know if it's sludgy, it's also not emptying properly, which then over time, it will become inflamed. So turmeric, a little bit of that Livton, the AF beta food, those are probably my favorites. Bitter foods, all of them, arugula, ginger, kale. Those are all going to help the digestive receptors to activate the liver and the gallbladder to start to kind of turn and burn, and then also start to thin out that bile.
Or do you find that like if you were to kind of pursue this path where you're letting go of like the energy drinks and these kind of carbohydrates and sugary things, do you develop more of a taste for those bitter foods like arugula and kale?
100%. And that's me. So I was the one who I would eat like, I would eat everyday lettuce. And that would be my salad. If there was lettuce in my salad, I would eat the salad. And then I started to lean into spinach a little bit. And it was probably more so because I knew how good it could be for me. So I kind of sucked up the fact that I didn't really like it. There's a mindset, right? This is good for me, so maybe I should do this. And then eventually, but the one that was the farthest away for me was arugula. It makes sense. It's the most bitter. And especially like if you get some fresh cut, really fresh cut arugula, man, that could be some bitter stuff.
It is zesty. Yeah,
zesty. And now what's fascinating. So I literally wouldn't touch anything that had arugula in it, or I'd pick around it. And now it's I think it's my actual favorite salad. So you can develop those. And that is a true sign of becoming a healthier human being, where you redevelop that palate. Wait, I want to go back real quickly here. And for some people in the time frame that it takes to heal up, and this is sometimes harder to just comprehend and or swallow if this happens to be you. And what I mean by that is this, that often the solution right there, those herbs, they're phenomenal. They're home run hitters, really. Dandelion root, globe artichoke, a little bit of milk thistle. Those are home runs. You put all three of those together, get some AF beta food. Now we have herbal action, medicinal components taking place there, and we're feeding with the AF beta food, literally a home run. And those will also help. Bile is one of the things that will determine whether or not you're constipated. If you have a sludgy gallbladder, what follows that is constipation. But nonetheless, what I'll see is that some individuals will be on that protocol, and 60 days go by, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days go by, and very little symptomatic change. And that's when we start to have to tap into the emotional component of this. That's when we have to at least address, or at least acknowledge, that if we are staying in frustration, maybe you're at a dead-end job, maybe you're in a relationship that's frustrating, maybe there's an emotion that overrides all of the good things that you do every day. And this is real as it gets. And I say that, and I want to share that in our show tonight, because sometimes it's not chasing the next protocol and chasing the next magical herb or vitamin. Sometimes that medicine is sitting right on top of us. And like today, sometimes when you change your mind, or you open your mind, that's when healing begins.
Such a beautiful reminder, Bart, because it's universal in these circumstances or in any other.
Yes, 100%. So hopefully that gives some people some insight on what the gallbladder does. To be paying attention. Remember, 1 million surgeries per year. Way too many. We should never get used to or normalize the idea of anything being taken out of the human body. I know there's emergency situations, but we should never normalize it. By the time we get to the point where 1 million people are getting their gallbladders removed because they have stomach pain, we're normalizing it. That's not okay. Yeah, it's one of the things, if we pay attention to how we think, how we move, how we eat, we can dial this in.
Sure can. Guys, thank you so much for joining us this evening on the Health Made Simple show.
Once again, thank you everyone for showing up. Keep doing your thing. Keep sharing it out. Keep spreading love. Hopefully this lands in maybe the mailbox or the ears of someone that will make a difference in their life. Hopefully we kept it simple enough. Keep doing your thing. Keep sharing it out. Keep spreading love. We appreciate you. And of course, continue to take deliberate action for your mind, your body, overall wellness. Y'all be awesome.